come seeking adventure and salty old pirates, eh? Sure, you've come to the proper place. But keep a weather eye open, mates. There be squalls ahead, and Davy Jones waiting for them what don't obey.
Ahoy mateys, and welcome to TrikBrix. I'm Jamie, and today we're going to embark on a very special retrospective series. The pirate theme is not only one of my own personal favorites, it is beloved worldwide, and it just so happens that 2019 marks the 30th anniversary of when this classic collection first set sail. So, we're going to begin at the beginning, with the original 1989 wave. And instead of starting small and working our way up, I've decided to kick this whole 30th anniversary celebration off with a bang. Widely regarded as one of the all-time greatest LEGO sets ever, I present to you the majestic Black Seas Barracuda, also known as the Dark Shark in some parts of the world. Designated set number 6285, this beauty contains 909 pieces, 8 minifigures, and retailed for $110 in 1989. Adjusted for inflation, that's about $225 in today's money, which undoubtedly made for more than a few disappointed kids. I've got the instruction booklet here, which features the wonderful original box art on the front, and this was before LEGO switched to the system logo, so you've still got the old yellow Legoland corner stripe here. If we flip it over, the back has some very nice alternate builds, including a small pirate hideout and a dry dock. But we're not here to look at a book, so let's dive right in. I'm kind of at a loss as to where to begin here. There's just so much greatness going on. I guess we'll start up top and work our way down. The highest points on the ship are capped off with 2 different sized Jolly Roger flags. And right away I'd like to share a little tip. If you've ever owned any of these large flags, you'll know that the clips are notoriously prone to breakage. One way to help avoid this is to slide them onto the bar piece instead of actually clipping them on. These things aren't cheap to replace, so this may save you a bit of heartache in the future, because no pirate ship would be complete without the old skull and crossbones. This is a technique that I actually employ when attaching all vintage flags, big or small, because it's better to be safe than sorry. This thick string here is a single 49-inch long piece, running from bow to stern, which really adds some nice framing and shape to the overall build. And then you have one of the most important parts of any 18th century ship, the sails. The Barracuda gets a total of 5, and they're all made of a thin, stiff, almost paper-like cloth material. Much like the large Jolly Roger flag, these are also easily abused, and even more expensive to replace, so if you're in the market for a used set, my number one recommendation is to look at the condition of the sails. Common problems include fraying, fading, torn holes, and stains. A complete set of genuine LEGO replacements can cost well over $100 in good condition, so it's best to look for a set with nice sails, unless you find a killer deal. More on current secondhand pricing at the end of this video. My sails are just slightly faded, which I don't mind as much as some of the other problems, since it gives it a bit of a weathered appearance. Other than that, they're in pretty decent shape. The main and foresails hang from the masts on these upside-down plate-built yards, which use a very simple yet effective attachment method. The jib hangs from the aforementioned string running front to back, and the instructions direct you to thread the string through this bottom corner hole, but I think that puts undue stress on the sail, and it looks just fine like this in my opinion. You've got 4 rigging pieces keeping the masts aligned, with each attached at the top to crow's nest platforms, perfect places to display your plundering scalawags. There's also a hoist here for loading and unloading booty. Instead of a winding winch, you actually just have this long piece of string tied to a modified plate piece, which can be attached anywhere you like, and then to control the raising and lowering action, you just pull the string. The hoist is also able to swing left to right. At the end of its hook, we'll find a treasure chest nestled in this interesting lift pallet, which makes use of a pliable rubber hose. Inside the chest, some swag in the form of 8 gold coins. You also have 2 more of these booms attached to the rear of the mainmast, but they're just here to guide the string. Moving down just below the bowsprit, we've got the figurehead, which actually features what used to be a pretty rare piece, the naked minifig torso. It wouldn't be till the year 2000, 11 years later, that this was reintroduced. The face print is female and actually appears twice in this set, but we'll get back to that in a bit. She's clutching a yellow goblet, and topping her off is a red bandana. I would have liked to have seen this molded in yellow as well, just so it looked like the figurehead was all carved together, but the bandana was never offered in that color. The forecastle has some yellow railing details surrounding a bit of deck for minifigs to stand watch, and you also have one of these TrikBrix on each side to guide the anchor string. It's a good idea to decide beforehand which side of the ship you're going to be displaying most of the time, since moving the anchor from side to side either requires disassembling part of this railing or untying the string. For a bit of added play value, the anchor can be raised and lowered by turning this winch just behind the foremast. And now we get to the main deck. That's kind of a misnomer though, since there actually isn't too much deck here, at least in the center. Instead, the designers decided to have an open hole down to the lower deck where the cannons sit, with some 2 stud-wide plates running along the railing on each side. I'm okay with it though, since there's still enough room up here for plenty of pirates to stand, and it makes accessing the cannons much easier than if this was all covered by plates. But that's not to say the upper level is lacking in detail. There's a small storage barrel here, a cutlass on each side of the anchor winch, and some simple yet effective railing detail. And notice this center gap on each side. At some point, your pirates are going to need to get rid of some unwanted guests, so we're provided with this 2x8 plate, which is, of course, the infamous plank. These bar plates make accessing the lower hold a bit easier, although only those with the smallest hands are going to have much luck actually utilizing this space, since it's pretty cramped. I do like the ability to throw a few treasure chests down here though, and I'd be disappointed if this was just all wasted space. If we move down into the cannon area, there are a few windows and a pair of shutters here that also open into the hold. And speaking of cannons, as you can see, the Barracuda comes armed with 4, 2 to a side, and you have these handy little cannonball baskets here in between each one. And in this case, we're going to need all those because these cannons are of the firing variety. Depending on which part of the world your set came from, it may be equipped with non-firing versions. To get a better look, we can easily pull one out since they're not held in by any studs. As I've stated several times in the past, these are by far my favorite firing LEGO weapons. The stud shooters and spring-loaded missiles of today just don't do much for me, but these are just classic. And I really like the little brown wheels they used on the cannon mounts here. Once back in place, they can be pushed into position since there's a bit of wiggle room back and forth, and these red flag elements here worked perfectly as gun port covers, easily raised for firing, and then you can lower them when the cannons are stowed. The deck around and beneath the main mast is nearly identical to the one up front, with the same storage setup below, but we do get this nice little fully stocked weapons rack right here, a covered porthole on either side for your minifigures to fire through, and just outside each of those is a halberd for when said pirates run out of ammunition. Double doors on each side lead into Captain Redbeard's cabin, which we'll get to in a moment. But first, we're going to follow these steps up to the poop deck, where we'll find the all-important ship's wheel and a few flintlock pistols within easy reach of the helmsman. There's also a pair of small lanterns flanking the wheel and the top of the steps, and 3 large lanterns positioned on the stern, and this center one with the Jolly Roger is hinged, which allows for adjusting the tension on this string a bit. You've got some simple railing along the sides, and you probably noticed that this deck is slanted downward toward the front. That's because it too is built on hinges, and can be raised for access to the captain's cabin. To get an even better look, a large portion of the stern section is also able to swing down if we lift this retaining piece, keeping it in place. There's not a ton to see in here, but we've got a treasure chest with a goblet on top, and inside are 8 more gold coins, which brings our pirate's plunder to 16 pieces of gold, the most coins ever offered in a single wide-release set. A printed treasure map tile hangs on the front wall, certainly not the last time we'll see that element in this series, and below that is a covered window that can be opened when the captain wants to keep an eye on his crew. You're not going to be adding a ton of minifigures to this small space, but I think it's sufficient enough, although I would have liked to have seen a bunk or something for Redbeard to take a rest on after a long day of pillaging. A few more windows let some light in on each side, and I absolutely love these lattice pieces. They add so much to the look of this whole section in my opinion, and if we go ahead and close this up, we'll see a few more on the back, along with some nice detailing by way of these old style flower elements, this modified brick, and 2 stacks of cones between the windows. Below that, you've got a little platform here, with this modified plate on the edge, which is intended to have a string attached to it in order to tow this small boat. I have the string, but I opted not to install it on mine just because it tends to get in the way a lot. Instead, I usually just put the boat up here on the platform. The modified plate does a decent job of keeping it in place. The dinghy itself is a very simple build, with just a few plates for your pirates to sit on, a pair of oars, and a small flag on the rear. Beneath the platform is the rudder. Unlike the Skull's Eye schooner, this one isn't activated by the ship's wheel, but it can still be physically moved side to side thanks to a few clips. You also have 2 more flaps on each side, although these are pretty much just for decoration and don't really lead anywhere. I could probably go on for an hour about this set and all of its little details, such as these decorative arches above the cabin windows and the way the yellow and black color scheme flows from bow to stern. But we've got a whole crew of cutthroat scallywags to attend to, so let's give them a quick peek before we get back to my final thoughts on the ship. For the most part, these guys are all very similar to one another. You've got the mustachioed quadruplets, each with either a red or blue bandana, and red or blue striped shirt with belt. Obviously, given that these were released in 1989, none of the figures in this set get any rear torso printing or alternate faces, but they were groundbreaking at the time for one very important reason. The minifigures in the Pirates theme were the very first to feature anything other than the classic Lego smiley face, so even if you're not a huge fan of Pirates, unlikely if you're still watching this, you can thank them for that. Next up, we've got a pair of Eyepatch wearing twins. They each get a tricorn hat, black and brown respectively, and a blue jacket with some nice collar detailing, a red and white striped shirt peeking through, and a belt. And then we have the pirate Winch. Since this was the first series to feature more realistic facial expressions, I think it's safe to assume that this was the very first specifically female face print, and it's the same one we saw on the figurehead. She's topped off with a blue bandana and has a very nice torso print with a necklace, frilly collar, red corset, and a few belts. White pants finish off her ensemble. And finally, my favorite Lego pirate of all time, the infamous Captain Redbeard himself. One look at him and you know he's either been engaged in piracy for most of his life, or he's just super unlucky. He's lost an eye, a hand, and a leg, but that hasn't stopped him from sailing the high seas in an endless search for fortune and glory. He's wearing a bicorn hat with printed skull and crossbones, a pair of brown epaulets, and another very nice torso print with jacket, green shirt, and brown belts. But the hook hand and peg leg are what really puts the captain in a class of his own for me. He's not rare by any stretch of the imagination, so you definitely need to add him to your minifigure collection if you haven't already. He's accompanied by his faithful pet parrot, the classic red version with printed face and feathers, and a mischievous monkey. Even though he's a bit out of scale, these were still very cool figures, and thanks to having 4 hands, it's easy to pose him in all sorts of interesting places on the ship. And your crew certainly won't go wanting for weapons. All told, we get 3 muskets, 6 pistols, 2 halberds, and 9 cutlasses. Plus, the captain is given an extra treasure map besides the one in his cabin. And that about wraps it up. If you're at all a fan of pirates or just sailing ships in general, you need to find a way to add this set to your collection. It really is that good. And if you've ever seen it in person, you'll know that pictures and video just don't do it justice, no matter how hard I've tried in this review. If you're interested, you may have to do a bit of saving though. A used set in good condition generally runs in the $200 to $300 range, and that's probably the route you'll have to take unless you've got a fairly high Lego budget. A new sealed copy can go for 10 times that amount. I got this one used, and it's not perfectly mint, but it's mine, and I'm so happy to have it in the collection. I can only imagine all of the adventures this thing would have went on when I was a kid. That said, I'm still kind of torn as to which is my favorite between this and the Skull's Eye Schooner, because both are absolutely amazing. So let me know in the comments what your favorite is. And while you're at it, if you like this review, feel free to leave a thumbs up, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. I'll be back soon with episode 2 of the Pirates Retrospective series, so keep a weather eye on the horizon, mates. Until then, this has been Jamie for TrikBrix. As always, thanks for watching. Take care and play well.